You're listening to I Have Some Notes, a podcast supported by listeners like you. To contribute, visit patreon.com/I Have Some Notes.
Welcome, everyone, to I Have Some Notes, Side Notes Edition, our 2024 Year in Review. I'm Liam Creswick.
I'm Scottsy Bourgeois.
And I'm Greg Beaver.
Happy New Year, fellas.
Hi.
Again.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess we would have said that at the last Voyage of the Demeter. Sorry.
But officially, formally, now it's a new year.
Okay, well, I know how your New Year's were. We discussed it. Let's get into movie stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is going to be our annual, year in review show. We talk a little bit about some of the big things in the movie industry that we found interesting, and then go into the films that we're the most excited to discuss. Maybe not necessarily like a top 5 ranked list, but we each have a number of films that we think were notable, discussable, memeable. And we're going to get into it. But, Greg, you had some movie industry stories that you sort of wanted to feature and stir up a little discussion on.
Yeah, sure. I picked about 3 of them, and you guys can tell me whether these sort of marry with what you feel were some of the biggest stories in the movie industry in 2024. But at first, I guess we'll just maybe briefly talk about what were the best movies in terms of money. You know, because they look wildly different than I think any of our lists of movies that we found to be the best of the year. As often is the case, you know, four quadrant movies always, you know, they're not necessarily bad movies, but they don't necessarily challenge you a whole lot. So number 1 was Inside Out 2, which made $1.6 billion, which is crazy. I think because that's more than what the original had made, right?
Yes, I just think it's wild. We're into movies making billions of dollars era.
Yeah,
Like
just on the regular. And like, if it doesn't make $1 billion, people are like, huh, what a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, Moana 2 really underperformed at 999,000.
Yeah. And Deadpool and Wolverine came in at 1.3 billion. So that must be the new highest grossing R-rated movie of all time, right?
It might be.
Probably.
I would have to assume that, but maybe some of our listeners can correct me. Moana 2 was almost made $1 billion. Surprising since it wasn't very well reviewed, but you know, people. It was the summertime. People wanted to take their kids to something, so I get it. And Moana, the original, was extremely good, so I can understand why everybody would want to pile into the theaters for that one. Yep. Yeah. That is, and Despicable Me 4. I did see this one. It does suck. Real bad. I was not having fun. You know, there's going to be more of them because it made almost $1 billion as well. And then, wrapping up, a movie that I liked enough was Dune Part 2. So, yeah. Lots of Hollywood powerhouses making extremely expensive movies and finding a sliver of return on them after they've made $1 billion, right?
It's not terribly surprising to me that 3 of the top 5 movies are family movies.
Yeah.
I'm also not surprised that Deadpool and Wolverine is number 2, because it was one of the most anticipated blockbusters of the year. Dune Part 2 doing as well as it did kind of impresses me, actually, especially because it's not a family. It's emphatically not a family movie, and it's part 2 of a sci-fi epic. And the fact that a genre film like Dune made it into the top 5 is impressive to me. And I think it is worth noting number 6, right behind Dune Part 2, is Wicked. And I think the only reason Wicked isn't up at $1 billion is because it came out late last year. Yeah. It's still in theaters as we're recording, and it will almost certainly gross $1 billion before it's out of theaters.
Yeah. I guess that kind of segues in nicely into another topic of mine, which was we got a bit of a reprieve from the glut of superhero movies. And this was partly because, or mostly because, of the writer's strike in the previous summer. So I guess my question is, did it do any good for you? Were you sad that there was an absence? Did you feel good that there was an absence?
I do want to. I think it was not only the writers striking, but also Jonathan Majors striking other people that really complicated the next year of movies.
Yikes!
Yeah,
yeah, they did have to do a very abrupt left turn on their long-term plans. I felt very neutral about it. The year kind of went by without me really noticing the lack of superhero movies, and that, I don't know if that's a condemnation of them or not. But then at the same time, Deadpool and Wolverine did fantastic. And maybe that's because it came out in a bit of a vacuum. Maybe it wouldn't have done so well if there had been 4 other superhero blockbusters coming out throughout the year around it, right?
Yeah, if there had been some kind of Marvel turd on either side of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it really was for like any of the Marvel zombies. It was the only thing to jump into the theaters for if you're looking for that, itch to scratch.
And that's, you're asking if it's good or bad for us. My partner Amanda said in the fact that there was no movies, superhero Marvel movies specifically this year, like we're out. Because we watch all of them. We've watched all the Disney Plus shows. We've watched all the movies, and we didn't watch Agatha all along. We haven't watched What If yet. I think we're out. I think we're done. I think we can. They gave us our chance to jump off, and we took it. Yeah.
I mean, listeners of this show will not be surprised that I was like quite pleased with the reprieve, because I've made my feelings known about my exhaustion with superhero movies several times. But again, like Scott, I didn't really, I guess I'm thinking that I enjoyed it in retrospect, but like, I think I'm more on Scott's side of things, where I just didn't really notice, and just kind of went about my business, just not worrying about yet another, CGI mess, which was kind of nice. Although I mean, we did get another superhero movie ish, which was Joker Folie. I did this in Folie à Deux. Even practicing it pre-show did not help me.
Can you imagine being the marketer who got that dropped on his desk? Like, I gotta sell a movie.
What?
That no one can pronounce. Yeah.
This was a very strange superhero, as it turned out to be a musical. Now, I haven't seen it, but my understanding is it's like a musical to the point of being sort of like diegetic, like any other musical. Is that true?
I haven't seen it either. So.
Yeah.
Neither have I.
Anyway, I think
compared to the other musical none of us have seen.
Yeah, that's right. But it is speaks to something that did come up quite a bit in the year about how movie studios were fairly shy about any movie that was a musical, and apparently even the Wicked trailer, the movie that did so well late in the year, did not really feature any singing directly. Like, songs were in the background, but the earliest trailer kind of, made it look more like your standard affair, even though everybody should know that that's a musical. It is a very quite famous play, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, based on a very popular Broadway musical, yes.
Yeah. They did the same thing to Mean Girls too. Like every musical that came out, they were terrified to market it as such, which is insane for 2 reasons. One, because why would you try to hide that? Like, be what you are. Like, don't try to deceive people. It's a zero sum winning situation, a no win situation. but also people love musicals. There was a whole problem of people going to Wicked to sing over top of the movie, not only interrupting Wicked, but interrupting movies in the theater next door.
Yeah.
So like, there's obviously an appetite for it. I don't know why they wouldn't lean into it like crazy.
Yeah, if you don't market it as the musical it is, you're going to get a lot of angry people who came to see the movie under false pretenses and weren't coming to see a musical and are now upset that they're sitting through a musical. And people who do want to see musicals who aren't going to come see your movie because they don't think it's a musical.
Yeah.
It's this weird backward approach to marketing them. And you're absolutely right. It was prevalent all year. Earlier in the year, we were pointing out a number of movies that low key were being told that they're musicals, but none of the advertising is making that clear. And like, Liam's absolutely right. Just be proud of what you are. Celebrate your art. Be weird.
It's strange because, like, why are you greenlighting these movies if you don't really have confidence?
If you're afraid about them, yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe it's like, well, we want to make this, but we also are afraid that we're not going to hit all the quadrants we want to hit, right? So
the venture capitalist left hand isn't looking at what the venture capitalist right hand is doing. Some marketers are like, Wicked's big, invest in it. And other people are like, musicals won't make money, shy away from it. It's like, you guys are making the same movie. They're all just scared about line nut going up.
Yeah.
And finally,
easy way to make the line go up.
Oh yeah. Speaking of making the line go up artificially. And anyway, it was the year of AI in the sense that you could not get away from any talk of it whatsoever, and it started to infect our daily lives with it being tied into search engines. There was AI sitting in the Facebook Messenger app. I have no idea what that's for or who uses that or why. It's very strange to me. Unless I guess people like using AI to like send their friends messages. That's very weird to me. If that's
I
what you're doing.
don't know.
But in terms of the movie side of things, obviously, it's been a continued high point of contention as some movie studios sort of tip their hand that they may be using AI generated images more strongly in the future. And in fact, over the holiday season, Coca-Cola decided to release some fully AI generated Coca-Cola ads that were terrible.
Absolutely awful. Yeah.
Yes.
Devoid of any context, joy, or whatever. It is as soulless as you would expect it to be for being written and created by AI.
Yeah, just a series of images of Coca-Cola and surprised animals at the Coke truck reacting.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing is the opposite happened too. There's a movie coming out in 2025 called The Legend of Ochi, and it's like a family fantasy adventure film that looks phenomenal, looks wonderful, like weird, high concept, high fantasy, bizarre, sci-fi kind of looking thing. And the aesthetic of the trailer when it dropped, the way the CGI models look, the way that like some of the finishing on the human characters looked, everyone was like, well, this looks like an AI movie. Is this AI? This is AI, right? Oh my God, another AI movie. God damn it. And the people who made the movie are like, no. It's a real movie. We made a real movie. And so like it's just going to conflate every issue. Literally, there is we are post getting a clear answer on anything.
Yeah.
Nothing is
living
going
in the
you
post-truth
cannot
world.
trust anything you look at from here on out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
That is more of an extension of what we've already been experiencing. I mean, news and facts, so to speak, have been like that for years. Well, I mean, that's how some people feel about them. Some people are anti-fact.
They have a liberal bias.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know. It's not good for humanity as a whole. Obviously, I think that seems readily apparent to anyone who pays even cursory attention. And at some point, this AI thing is the bubble will burst. There's so much venture capital money going into it. Like the way that people can make money off of it is sort of dubious at best. And I feel like, we've come this far with special effects, with humans doing special effects, with care and attention. And it's still easy to tell when it's a computer generating it. I gotta tell you, Hollywood, you're not getting away from that. The uncanny valley is gonna follow you and dog you everywhere you go on this. It's not going to be good. People will clock it extremely quickly. Even if I know AI is going to keep getting better, but it's one of those things where the human eye is very good at detecting things that do not seem right. And that will be the future. I imagine in a few years when we are starting to question whether the special effects in movie A or B is full of AI or not. So, yay! I look forward to that.
Computer generated images, because I guarantee you every Marvel movie we've watched had AI in it, in that it was used in the Photoshop and the editing to like do some of the detail work.
Oh, for sure.
So when we're talking about AI, we need to be clear. Wholly computer generated images.
Correct. Yeah. The intelligence behind a lot of these imaging tools are very important. I mean, I use AI sometimes in Photoshop, not to build things whole cloth, but just to sort of like, it's good for removal tools and like taking this thing out that I don't want, or expanding the image when I need a little bit more white space or whatever it is. So yeah, like AI can be a very effective tool, and it can decrease the amount of work need to be done or I should say it can eliminate a lot of difficult tasks and make them much easier, and then speed up the creative process. And that's good.
The keyword there, I think, is difficult task. And my optimistic hope is that AI being in everything and everywhere, like messenger chat, is a fad of this particular moment in time. And when the dust settles, we will have this technology that's good at helping you erase backgrounds in Photoshop and doing the useful things, helping you do difficult tasks and not showing up at all the easy tasks, like sending your friend a message or writing anything.
Yeah. I think the only problem is like these technologies tend to get used by the worst people for the worst reasons. And while that may not be the majority of people, it will certainly affect an outsized number of us.
It will be used for good and for bad, but hopefully eventually it won't be used for silly, because right now it's being used for silly.
Yeah. Anyway, we should, like, speaking of all the bad, I guess enough with all the bad stuff that's going on in Hollywood. We can start talking about some of the good stuff.
Yeah. The good stuff. This is one of my favorite episodes of the year, because we get to talk about the good movies, not the mediocre movies, though I do love talking mediocre movies with you fellas. We get to talk about the good movies. So Scott, why don't you kick us off? What was a good movie you saw this year that you're excited to talk about?
Well, the first movie that immediately comes to mind, it's one that's been a standout for me since I watched it a few months ago now. It is a movie that had a wide release this year, so we're counting it, and I definitely saw it this year. But it is technically a movie from 2022 because it started to make like the festival rounds then. Mm-hmm. And that is a movie you may have heard of called Hundreds of Beavers. Now, if you have not heard of Hundreds of Beavers, oh boy, you're about to, and you should definitely seek it out because it's available basically everywhere right now. So it's written and directed by Mike Cheslick. It stars Ryland Brixton Cole-Tooze, Olivia Graves, and Wes Tank, and hundreds of beavers. Hundreds of people, people dressed in silly mascot costumes. This might be a genius film. It's an absolute throwback to the kind of old school broad, like lowbrow slapstick comedy that you just don't really see anymore in the films. Like old Charlie Chaplin stuff, old Buster Keaton stuff.
Yeah.
It's like a live action Looney Tunes cartoon in its energy, in its, it just like the crazy stuff that's happening to the main character, his interactions with the animals, the way the animals work. He's living in a cartoon. It's filmed in black and white. It's mostly silent, not entirely. It was filmed almost entirely in front of green screens, so all of the backgrounds are composited in weirdly gorgeous ways.
Mm-hmm.
And it is hilarious. It is funny. It speaks with the language of a cartoon or even a video game in many ways. So it's like very easy to follow. It's hilarious. It's broadly physical. And it was unlike any movie, any modern film, I should say, that I've seen in years, probably a decade. I laughed myself silly. Anita laughed herself silly. And I cannot say enough good things about it. It might be the best movie I saw this year, weirdly.
I highly rank it as well. I saw it in theaters earlier in the year and ran out of the theater trying to tell anyone I could about seeing this movie. And I'm glad it found that love like over the year. Yeah, it's Adult Swim aesthetics. It's just, and I love that this guy just was like what possesses you to want to essentially do it the hard way? Like, I guess because you get this unique visual thing out of it, but it's just like, what an ambitious endeavor. Like, even if you don't really think it's that funny or that brilliant, you cannot deny you haven't seen a movie like it this century.
Nope.
And it's really like a true like passion project, one of a kind of a work.
And it's excellent. Like, it is legitimately funny. It is a great movie and it is absolutely worth checking out. As I mentioned, Hundreds of Beavers is available to stream off of like Canopy, YouTube. It's just all over the place right now. If you haven't heard about it, go seek it out. Give yourself a good hearty laugh. It is worth checking out.
Well, since we don't even have these in a particular order. So since we're talking about far out visual cartoon movies, one of my favorite movies of the year, and definitely the one I was the most excited for, was The People's Joker. The director and writer Vera Drew was on my favorite podcast, other than this one, Comedy Bang Bang, to promote it, and was like, I'm never going to get to see this movie. Because if you're not familiar with People's Joker, it is a movie about a Joker, like the Batman villain character. No Warner Brothers signed off on this. Like, neither of the Warner Brothers signed off on this. She just sort of like did a copyright infringement and then just asked, oops, sorry, can I do it anyway? And they were kind of found out legally, yeah, I guess you can. I guess this whole thing counts as satire. Like, punk as fuck to just take these characters for a joyride and be like, sorry, I took your copyrighted material for a joyride. So takes the lore of Batman, specifically the lore of the Joker, and all of the other details you associate with the world of Batman, and uses it to just tell her life story as a trans woman and comedian. And it's brilliant. It's just like, she clearly loves these characters. She clearly has a story to tell, and just it hits exactly like Hundreds of Beavers. The exact same vibe, where you're going to walk away from it being like, I can't believe somebody conceptualized this, executed it, and it worked so damn well. Yeah, highly recommend People's Joker. The other thing I really liked about it, I will say, it's as much about her experience as a trans woman as it is about her as a comedian. And well, obviously, I'm not a trans person. A plot point of the movie is that they start an underground comedy club in a disused facility because they are tired of the toxic broy nature of the comedy scene. And before the pandemic, myself, friends of the pod, Glenna Showalter, Robin Slack, Lynn Anderson, we started a alternative comedy show in a queer punk venue that no one else was using for comedy. And made a point of featuring non-white, non-male, non-straight people whenever possible. I treasured those experiences deeply, and it was very fun to see characters more or less doing that as a plot point in this otherwise insane movie. Like Scott did an excellent job succinctly describing the consistent aesthetic of Hundreds of Beavers. It looks that kind of great throughout. Whereas part of the charm of The People's Joker was it was made over COVID kind of in pieces. And so she got different people to contribute different elements that then were sometimes even cut out and pasted together. So there's like a great scene where all the Batman villains are doing comedy and the Riddler is like a live action guy in front of a green screen. But Poison Ivy is this just like terrible, like PlayStation era 3D model. It's great. So, it's on Mubi right now, and I think it's on Canopy as well, or I'll lend you my Blu-ray. Did either of you guys get to see this one?
Not yet, but it is on my to watch list.
Okay, I've only been raving about it since February. That's fine. Yeah. Actually, if you get the chance, since you guys don't have any follow-ups, if you get your chance to actually watch it on the Blu-ray, she does this brilliant thing where she puts on her Joker costume. She's doing the bit, and she sort of early on says, "They said I had up to half an hour to record this DVD, just the menu, like the video that plays during the menu." She was told, like, record a clip of you being like, press here for play, press here for settings. And they told her she could have up to half an hour. So she just took the whole half an hour and like doing bits, and it's all stream of consciousness off the cuff, and you can't stop it because it's the menu. It's not like a stop play situation. So you kind of have this feeling of like, I watched it with Robin, Slack from the podcast, and we're like, we can't stop this, but I want to see her all the way through, but we also want to watch this movie, but also it's going to be a half an hour of her like riffing off the dome. The whole thing is just, again, much like Hundreds of Beavers, a labor of ambitious love. And that's what movies are all about.
Agreed.
Greg, what's the weirdest looking movie on your list?
What's the weirdest one? Well, I won't get to that one just yet because
Sure.
I think that we'll want to talk about that towards the end. How about we go with the most awkward one? Does that help?
Sure.
So I saw Speak No Evil, which is 110 minutes of deep social anxiety. You know that feeling of, you know, you have your friends over, and so, you know, you've invited a couple over, and then, you know, one of the members of the couple makes a joke that's a bit too real. You know, it's like it's less of a joke and more of an insult at their partner,
or like a confession or a cry for help.
Yeah, exactly. This is sort of like a series of those, not that exact premise, but that feeling for 110 minutes, and then it sort of keeps escalating. This stars James McAvoy, Mackenzie Davis, and Aisling Franciosi, which I think we just talked about in the last episode of the last voyage of the Demeter, right?
Yeah.
The premise is that Mackenzie Davis's family is on vacation in Italy, and they make fast friends with James McAvoy's family, who is staying at the same resort. And McAvoy invites them for a weekend on their acreage, but his family isn't what it seems. So the whole movie is essentially like one of these aforementioned awkward social situations after another, where James McAvoy does something like unhinged and then makes you feel like you're the asshole for thinking that he's unhinged. You know, like there's always like a kind of like a reasonable explanation behind it. And obviously it does a very good job of making, like, it takes its time. It's very methodical in its escalation of the unhinged behavior. And James McAvoy is really good at playing this, sort of, he's very imposing. Like, he's got this sort of like skulking body in this movie. And, the way that he's playing with his body language, the way he's moving too close to Mackenzie Davis or her partner or even the kid. Like it's just, it all coalesces into this deep sense of foreboding that something's going to go wrong. And it's never really, the movie's not, it's not really a spoiler to say that like something goes wrong. First of all, it's all that stuff is in the trailer, but I don't think the movie's really like trying to hide it. It's more about that sort of dramatic irony of the, like, things are, this guy's bad news. It's just you're waiting for this couple to do to get out of there, just like get out of there. But like it also is really good at providing the good family, of the Mackenzie Davis's family, with good reasons to stick around, and their logic for making their decisions. Like you could see yourself making that decision as well. So and so when it finally does pop off, it goes really hard into the paint, and it's a lot of fun. So I highly recommend Speak No Evil.
Hell yeah. It's based on a film in another language, right?
Yes.
I believe. Yeah. I was familiar with it. There's a YouTuber named Super Eyepatch Wolf who had a really good video essay earlier in the year about social anxiety horror. Sort of the quintessential example being the Twilight Zone episode called The Lottery, where someone is sort of picked to be sacrificed out of a hat, and then suddenly they're a social pariah. And one of the examples he uses is the original Speak No Evil, and so I'm interested to see both of those.
Oh yeah,
but yeah, touches on a lot of that awkward horror of social interactions gone horribly awry.
Speaking of social interactions gone horribly awry, how about I queue up my next movie?
Please.
So the next one that I really enjoyed this year and that I wanted to talk about is a movie that landed on Netflix with pretty much no fanfare and was actually very, very good. It's called It's What's Inside, written and directed by Greg Jardin, who I want to say is kind of new to the scene. And the movie is great. Like it's really tightly scripted. It's got a wonderful visual style. And I'm very interested to see more movies that Greg Jardin does, based on just this one. I don't want to super spoiler it because I feel like you'll get the best out of it if you kind of go in not sure what to expect, but I'll set it up this way. It is kind of an existential horror movie. It takes place at, it's this group of friends who've been together for many years. One of them is getting married. And so the night before his wedding, they get together to have like one big final party before he ties the knot. And then their awkward friend from years before shows up with a party game that he wants to play, because he was always the guy who brought interesting games to the party. And it's unexpected that he showed up. No one was expecting him. And they all kind of agree to settle in to play this game. And it is a high stakes social deduction game. And that is where the plot really starts to unravel. And I won't spoil anything else beyond that. Check it out. Again, it's a visually gorgeous movie. It had a lot of fun twists and turns throughout that literally had Anita and I at one point going, wait, what? And it was kind of a joy to watch. It was an unexpectedly good movie. And it really flew under the radar. So, do yourself a favor, check it out. It's on Netflix. It's What's Inside. You might hate it. I don't know, but I suspect that you'll have a good time.
I like your pitch to just sort of watch it sight unseen. And I got to say, I'm both admire and I'm a little jealous that you watched this sight unseen. I remember you telling us about it before we recorded an episode, that you and Anita just sort of picked it, like popped up on Netflix. Hey, based on nothing but the thumbnail and the description, you gave it a try, went into it totally blind. And I think that's why you had might have contributed to why I had such a good time with it.
Yeah. And it was great.
I think that's a case for maybe doing that more often. I was talking to a friend recently who was telling me about a horror movie he had watched, like some sort of dumb, cheesy premise horror movie. Couldn't even remember the name of it, but he was saying how he just sort of picked it off of Tubi because it looked interesting, couldn't remember the name, half describes it. And I was like, in that moment, I'm like, I'm so jealous of you. I have a Letterboxd watch list of 75 films. There is not a film I watch that I don't know, like, what country the director comes from, or like what the general hype of the like zeitgeist is saying about it. And so my goal for 2025 is to watch more movies blind.
Spontaneously.
Spontaneously. Cause you just can't watch a movie blind. Go into a movie blind. Cause I think you get a lot out of it. And I'm just too deep into the movie nerddom to not have all the meta context when I watch something. So,
yeah,
as will be evident by 4 out of my 5 picks. I mostly am going to talk about who made them and why it's relevant.
Well, why don't you queue up your next pick right now?
Indeed, and it is also a existential, socially anxious horror film where the an authorial reading is relevant and important to it. And through an auteur lens. Genuinely my favorite movie of the year is I Saw the TV Glow, directed by Jane Schoenbrunn. And they are also a trans person, stars Justice Smith and Bridget Lundy Payne. And yeah, this movie moved me in a way maybe only 1 or 2 movies I watch in a given year, regardless of whatever year they come out, moves me. I'm going to go to my notes here because honestly, this movie speaks for itself. It says what it truly bears its soul to you. And even the best writing on it that I've read since it came out kind of fails to capture what's great about it. So I'm really not going to try too hard. But I've been thinking about it since I saw it in May. So it uses the language of horror films to create a feeling of surreal unease, like that idea that something's not right. So it'll get shelved with horror movies in the future. It'll be filed under horror movie when it's streaming, but it's not really a horror movie. It just uses the language of horror to make a feeling of unease. And then uses that vibe as the catalyst to explore the existential dread of having to either go through the painful, destructive ordeal of totally destroying and recreating yourself to live authentically, or staying in a body or a time or a place or an emotion that is killing you. And like, damned if you do, damned if you do. Like they're both such horrifying prospects. To either be stuck somewhere that doesn't fit or have to basically kill yourself to live. And it is definitely a trans narrative. It's not ambiguous really about that fact, but it is so profoundly human that I don't think like it is probably going to be one of the great queer trans films and also just one of the great human emotion, sense of self films. But like I said, I'm not really the one to articulate this. So I was reading an excellent piece from a magazine called Them Magazine by a person named Samantha Allen. They were talking about how it's a little disappointing that this film is going to get pretty much totally overlooked at the Oscars and possibly in favor of Amelia Perez, which is also a movie about a trans person, but has none of the heart, the integrity, the genuineness that this one does. But they do both a good job of summing up this movie and why it might get overlooked for the Oscars. So I just would love to read that quote for you. This is Samantha Allen from Them Magazine. This film is translating a hyper-specific feeling into a universal language. Far from being merely a trans film, I Saw the TV Glow is about all of our repressed relationships with our innermost selves, and this should appeal to Oscar voters, about the life-changing power of media itself. The filmmaker Jane Schoenbrunn can make a brilliant and beautiful observed genre film about identity, and the Academy will reliably reward a star-driven spectacle that takes more superficial approach to the same subject matter. Indeed, Hollywood is far more interested in an outside-in perspective on trans life than the converse. And so a lot is being said that, yeah, this Amelia Perez is going to kind of get the Crash and Green Book treatment people are suspecting of like Oscar people patting themselves on the back for doing the progressive liberal thing, and then overlooking much more genuine representation of those stories. I also like that I haven't really told you what the movie's about. I just told you why it's beautiful and brilliant, and I think everyone should see it. It's not really about the plot. It's about the harrowing emotional journey it takes you on. And this isn't a spoiler, but the ending truly can be read as profoundly optimistic or deeply gutturally tragic. And it's really just a matter of perspective.
You know, there is something to be said about sometimes a movie is less about its story and more about its vibe. And
this is a vibe movie for
you're
sure.
definitely selling this as a big vibe movie, and that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Greg, you saw it?
I did. Yeah. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I did not clock it as a trans narrative. I did not know much about it when I saw it. And when I was talking to Erin after we had finished watching it, she was talking about it as if it was quite obvious, and in retrospect it was. But I think that it was just sort of like a reminder for me, like how bad I've always been at. I think reading metaphor is a skill, and I do not have it. I have to work very, very hard to read the metaphors and subtext of a movie correctly. Well, I guess there's not really a correct way of doing it, but like to be able to interpret
astutely.
those things in like a intelligent way that I can recommunicate. So yeah, I know I did feel that sort of profound sense of uncomfortableness, that was very pervasive from the movie, and it is, like you say, deeply moody, and the dialogue is, I would say, is understated. It does really rely much more heavily on faces and visuals and things like that to sort of get across what's going on underneath.
Like, I don't think you need to be embarrassed, because I suggested this film to my friend Karina, who's a big Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, and part of the charm of this movie is it traffics in 90s nostalgia to sort of tell its story of a sense of self and a sense of place where you belong. And it uses a lot of very overt Buffy allusions to do it. So I was like, Karina, you gotta go see it. And she took her husband and another dude, and those two guys apparently did not get that it was a trans narrative either. And even though I had told Karina about it, this is what she was telling me. I hope, Karina, it's okay. I'm quoting on this. The movie does start with the main character under a pink, like soft pink, purple, and white flag. Like the entire background behind the kid is a giant trans flag in the first 5 minutes of the movie. But yeah, they never use the word trans in the movie, because it's about that, but it's also about so much more, that like anyone who's gone through any kind of recreation of themselves should be able to get something out of it, like overcome an addiction, started over after a bad situation, lost a bunch of weight, went back to school, whatever. Like anyone who's transformed themselves or struggled to transform themselves will get something out of this. So it's just nice that like trans people have this brilliant, perfect, obvious trans movie about their experience, and the rest of us have plenty to chew on as well. So,
right. Yeah. Yep. Good pick.
Greg, go. What's the opposite? What's the farthest away for our segue? What's the least I saw the TV glow on your list? Or if you want to keep it in the queer movie canon,
I can.
do
Let's
that
keep talking about queer movies. I can talk about Love Lies Bleeding. Yeah, that was directed by Ross Glass and stars Kirsten Stewart, Katie O'Brien, and Ed Harris. Lots of thrillers on my list this year. I think I was just really into them, even to the point where I was watching like bullshit Netflix thrillers and getting a good amount of enjoyment out of them, like that.
You were really trying to sell us on Carry On.
he's gonna carry a bag on a plane. It's great. Love Lies Bleeding is the first of 2 movies on my list that are like unapologetically sexy as well, which is something that, I don't know, it's so weird in the modern era of film that it's so sexless. And so that when I see a movie that like has some sex in it and is not afraid of it, it's just, it's surprising, which seems a little bit unfortunate. It also prominently features a body type we rarely see in movies, and certainly not in this context at all. Like, women, as hulked out as Katie O'Brien is in Love Lies Bleeding, are typically like the heavy in an action movie, or appear solely to emasculate like a male character. So it like rarely are they a love interest, much less someone that the camera lusts after. And that's what's happening in Love Lies Bleeding. And I mean, aside from that, like, this is a really great crime thriller that also has something to say about like ambition and obsession. It gets a little weird at the end, I would say, in kind of a fun way. But it is sort of rather out of left field and unexpected. So I don't know, for some people that might jar them a little bit. But I would highly recommend Love Lies Bleeding. It's great.
Yeah, this one's on my to watch list, and unfortunately, I just didn't get a chance to get to it before we recorded. But I'm looking forward to it. Nothing you've said has made me less excited to see it.
I sure hope not, because I'm trying to build it up.
Well, I have seen it, and if I may, Greg, I agree with everything you've said, except for it's also a really good crime thriller. It's a okay crime thriller.
Okay, fair enough.
But I also think I found myself in a weird position when I watched it. I can't remember exactly where it falls in this order, but it was third or fourth. Around the time I watched this, I also watched Drive Away Dolls, No Country for Old Men, and Drive. All 4 of those movies are, whoops, we've got a very bad criminal guy's MacGuffin that is valuable and in our possession, and it shouldn't be, and his goons is coming to get us.
Right.
And I was just, by time, like, I'd watched, I think this was the 4th and the one, I was just kind of over these like crime gone wrong stories. So in this film, the vibes are immaculate, but the plot is kind of silly. And when you say the end gets weird, that's where it kind of lost me. But
fair enough.
Vibes are immaculate.
No, I was bang on with that then. If I may, then I would actually suggest something that is a stronger crime thriller called Last Stop in Yuma County. And I think you would really dig it.
That one's a freebie too. That one's not on Greg's list.
Yeah.
A little extra for you there, listeners.
Well, actually, we're going to take a little break, so we all get a little extra. We are going to be back with 3 more films to discuss from each of us that we are really excited about from 2024. We'll be right back.
What's up, nerds? This is Josh from Talking Smack, where we talk superheroes, movies, animation, comics, and so much more. Every week, we break down the latest blockbuster movies, TV shows, revisit comic events. We even talk to comic creators like Kyle Higgins, Melissa Flores, and Matt Groom. And don't miss out on our Superhero Showdown episodes, where we debate your suggestions on who would win in a fight, or maybe they might become friends. So join in on the conversation with me, Josh, and my co-host Alex every Wednesday on your podcatcher of choice. Look for our yellow and red icon, and we'll see you soon, Smackheads.
Welcome back to I Have Some Notes. We are discussing 2024, the year in film that it was, some of our favorite movies, some of the ones we're excited to talk about. Scott, what was another one you were into this year?
Let's turn things around a bit. We've been talking about like big heady movies. Let's do something that's a little more dumb, but still a tremendous amount of fun. One movie that I saw this year that I really enjoyed surprisingly a lot was Fall Guy. This was the kind of action comedy by David Leitch, starring Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt, Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Hannah Waddingham. It's good. Like, it's a good, fun blow 'em up movie about. So Ryan Gosling plays a stuntman on set with director played by Emily Blunt. He is the stunt double for Aaron Taylor Johnson, who's kind of like a Tom Cruise action hero. And basically he finds himself getting drawn into some kind of criminal conspiracy. And despite the fact that you can kind of see the twists coming a mile away, they're well executed. The action is really high octane and fun. It's a love letter to stunt action in movies, and they go out of their way to hit like all of the iconic stunts, like a car chase and like a big jump and like explosions and like big over choreographed fight scenes. Like it's all in there. And it was just so much fun to watch and surprisingly good. Like it could have been a really dumb, stupid movie, and it wasn't. And I just really enjoyed it. And I know I have a number of friends who saw it as well, who ranked it absolutely in one of their top movies of the year as well. So yeah, if you're looking for something a little more broad, but still just surprisingly good almost, Fall Guy kind of scratched that itch this year.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was a lot of fun, and actually, I've seen it on lists of film critics as well, making their top 10. So it made an impact for people, even though it doesn't appear to have made an impact at the box office, which is a shame because it really deserved a lot more love, and unfortunate that it didn't find the audience that it deserved.
Well, and especially in a year when, as we discussed before, there weren't a lot of like big superhero action blockbusters during the summer. Fall Guy kind of fit that niche, and I would argue, was a better movie than 3/4 of Marvel's oeuvre. So like, yeah, if you slept on Fall Guy earlier in the year, it's on streaming right now. It is a wild ride. It's just absolutely fun. Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt have such easy chemistry in the movie. I want to watch more movies starring the two of them, like honestly. Yep. And Ryan Gosling is clearly having just an absolute blast. And like, it's good. It's a good, fun movie.
Yeah.
It's a good, feel good, fun movie, guys. Come on.
Well, I haven't seen it, but so many people have talked about how it is that like love letter. And I think that just speaks to like when the artists have a love and an enthusiasm and a passion for what they're doing and aren't at least totally motivated by cynical money making, even a big dumb blockbuster, that like genuine artistic expression and joy comes through.
Yeah, for sure. It can elevate material that maybe on paper is kind of like meh. When you have people working on it that care about it, it can polish it up real good.
Yeah, I'm going to take a turn here. Then there is a stand-up special, but also just generally a creative person, a creator that I want to talk about right now. I know the last two films on my list were written and directed by trans women. And you might be like, "Oh, this Liam guy, is he looking for pats on the back? Is he like some
this
kind of
podcast is so woke?"
So woke. I'm going to say this with less irony than you think. It is a really exciting time for comedy being made by straight white men.
At last, they're getting their due.
Finally, it's time. But like a little bit, kind of like post Me Too, we got a whole bunch of, diversity in our media, which is great. There was a big push for that. There's a big appetite for that. We also got the reactionary, anti-woke, cancel culture, edgelord bullshit. All the established stand-up comedians kind of just kept their heads down. The Patton Oswalds and Jim Gaffigans of the world were just kind of like stay in their lane. But Connor O'Malley, and specifically his special Stand-Up Solutions, I think represents this kind of like new bubbling up crop of straight white male comics who are like, "K, if this is an even playing field, if equity and equality is de rigueur, and it should be, what does the role of a white dude look like in this landscape? How can we make fun of different types of masculinity and goofy white guy bullshit?" Right? Because like you can't punch down and you shouldn't punch down. if you're a straight white man, not really a lot of places to punch up unless you're doing class conscious, anti-billionaire stuff or political stuff. So what does punching laterally look like? And Conor O'Malley this year has released 3 short films independently on his website and on YouTube that I think is tapping in to that, like, what does it mean to be a straight white guy in comedy right now? And I'm not being glib. So his special stand-up solutions is on YouTube. It is great. The premise is he's obviously doing a stand-up set, but he's like he's playing a character where he's like a tech bro who's really excited to bring AI to stand-up comedy. And he's doing this like back and forth bit with this dumb AI. I think it's pre-scripted, but like trying to create comedy for the audience based on all their cell phone data that they've stolen. And it's all pre-written, but he's doing the tech bro character great. He's commentating on, the AI situation we live in, and it's funny as hell as stand-up specials go. Less than an hour, highly recommend Stand-Up Solutions. And to complement it, he has also had a short film called Corey's, which is a total, fully scripted, edited short film fiction about that kind of like sort of like dopey 20-something suburban idiot who either got married and or had kids too soon, and now he has to spend his Saturdays at Walmart buying diapers instead of, doing what 20-year-old boys do. And it kind of creates this like deranged duality in him. It would make a nice compliment with the Substance, actually. It's sort of like a shitty white guy version of the Substance and funny and ironic. But Corey's is great, also on YouTube. And then another one called Rap World, where it's a mockumentary about a bunch of dopey suburban idiots in 2009 trying to record a rap album, but it's all like off the dome. And it's like partly improvised by Conor O'Malley and the people in the movie. So it's got a bit of a like Spinal Tap vibe, but like for like Spinal Tap for like idiots who in between takes are probably recreating Jackass stunts, like that kind of a aesthetic. It's great. So anything Conor O'Malley has made in the last 2 years, check him out. He's going to be a crop of funny white dudes who eke out their place in a way that isn't problematic. And I would count Tim Robinson, Joe Pera, and Dan Licata among that crew. To the point where Conor O'Malley is the entire comedic relief in I Saw the TV Glow. He is on screen for less than 5 minutes, and anything funny that happens in I Saw the TV Glow comes out of his mouth, and he's on screen for maybe 3 minutes. So, just one of my favorite movies of the year was The Concept of Conor O'Malley. So. Are either of you guys familiar? Don't want to put you on the spot, but
nope.
Not yet, but I will, after that, very, enticing description, I will be checking him out for sure. I find that lately I've had, a real tough time finding comics that, meet my current headspace. So I think that kind of speaks to exactly what I might be looking for.
Nita's always on the lookout for a new favorite stand-up comedian, and this sounds not just up my alley, but possibly up her alley too. So we'll probably have to check him out a little later.
Yeah. Stand-up Solutions. Greg?
Going from loosely a movie to actually a movie, my next pick is Heretic. It's directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, and stars Hugh Grant and Sophie Thatcher of Yellow Jackets fame, and Chloe East, who I wasn't particularly familiar with, but was great. She was great in the movie. I'm not certain that there could be a movie more made for me to love. Like, this is a compact, claustrophobic thriller that philosophically interrogates organized religion and atheism. like if this took place on a spaceship, it would be my favorite movie of all time. Also, I should say that Hugh Grant's charismatic portrayal of like the film's sociopathic theologian is hands down my favorite performance of this year. Like he sells his character's point of view with like tightly controlled zeal and passion, while like conveying a quiet sense of malintent. It's so much fun to watch. The weird thing is, it's like, it's not fun to watch in like a tense way. I didn't feel tense during the movie. I felt like I was being told to really engage with Hugh Grant's arguments, and then to engage with the characters who are Mormons, their arguments. And it's not necessarily a super deep film on that side of things, but like the way that it presents its theories and things like that is very, very entertaining. It just breezes by, and there's lots of like good shock value for the thriller part of it. And maybe some genuine moments of disgust too. I had to think about it. I felt about it so positively. I had to think like, is this my new favorite movie of the year? And the only reason I'm not saying that now is just because of recency bias, and I don't want to undermine another movie I'll mention later, which I do consider to be my favorite movie of the year.
Oh yeah!
So go see it. Go see Heretic.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to catch this one, but Hugh Grant's been making some interesting choices lately.
Good choices, though. Generally speaking,
yeah.
It's always a delight lately to see him crop up in a film. Yeah,
I liked him as the villain in Dungeons and Dragons last year.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He's found an angle to work the straight man in a comedy, or I guess this isn't a comedy, but yeah, he's getting creative. He's not handsome leading man guy anymore. He's enjoying being a bit more of a character actor, I think.
Yeah,
I would
for sure, and I think that's a good place for him too.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess I'll jump back in then. You, Greg, just talked about a religious film with an incredible performance. So why don't we just continue with that? I caught Conclave, directed by Edward Berger. And on paper, it doesn't sound that exciting. It is a political thriller. Or maybe it does. I don't know. It is a political...
No, it doesn't. I had no interest in this based on the bit.
It is a political thriller about the election of the Pope. Not like a historical election. It is in a modern time. Yeah. The Pope unexpectedly dies, and so the cardinals have to get together and do their conclave to elect the next Pope. And it's a movie about the factionalism, about forces within the church which are looking to take it back, and forces within the church that are looking to make it more progressive. And that in itself is kind of enticing. What elevates it is that it is starring Ray Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, Sergio Castellitto, and Isabella Rossellini, who are all incredible actors, putting on at the top of their game, no less, who are putting on incredible performances, who are delivering passionate sermons and speeches. And it is so good. It is just so good. I went into the movie without a high expectation. I was interested in it because it seemed like it might be interesting, and it was riveting to watch. I quite liked it a lot. It's framed really well. It takes place in the Vatican, which is simultaneously this vast, open Gothic space and simultaneously so claustrophobic and like oppressive. All of the like backbiting and Knives Out infighting between characters who are being very polite and sanctimonious to each other's faces. It's so good, you guys. Like, it's definitely worth checking out. I don't know if it would necessarily make your top 5 of the year the way it did mine, but it's definitely worth checking out, if nothing more than just for the incredible performances by some incredible actors.
Okay.
I really wanted to fit this one under the wire, but it ended up being, Wednesday, the day before we record. And it was like 9:00, and I think it's a 3-hour movie almost, right?
No, it's a little over 2, I want to say.
Okay,
Find
still
out
too
real
long,
quick.
and I was just like, no, I'm just gonna have to deal with not seeing it. But it is pretty high on my list. I do enjoy like political thrillers like that. I am looking forward to it.
And it's an unexpected political thriller because it's a church political thriller.
It's about politics, but it's about this group of people's internal politics.
Yeah.
Not capital P politics. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, which in itself is interesting because you get to kind of see inside a group that you don't normally like think about or get a chance to really examine that closely, because we know when the Pope dies, there's this group that gets together to elect him, but we don't really know much about them, right? And this is kind of like, obviously it's fictionalized and it's elevated a little bit for drama, but it's kind of like a little peek inside that world. And it was really compelling, and I quite enjoyed it.
Well, you might have convinced me because, like you said, does this sound good on paper? To me, it didn't, and I was ready to avoid it because I don't give a shit about the Catholic Church.
But the Catholic Church is in many ways the perfect setting for a political thriller like this, because it is such an institution with so much bureaucracy and so much history and so much tradition, and so it is and so many internal factions that it does create this interesting hot pot for politics.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I also should know better than to, judge a book or judge a movie by how it looks on paper, what the thumbnail and the description tells me. Cause my next film was one I didn't think I was going to watch, didn't care about it wasn't in theaters, didn't care when it hit streaming, but it kept showing up on very high on a lot of best ofs of outlets and people I respect, that I was like, all right, let's give it a chance. And damned if I didn't love it. So maybe Conclave will be the same for me. Same in that regard. But I was extremely impressed by Challengers. What a riot. I didn't want to watch it because I was like, okay, not a big sports movie guy. And I don't want to see the famous, the sort of the thing everyone knows about it is there's sort of maybe not a literal 3-way, but like there's sexy tension between Zendaya and 2 guys, right? Like we've all seen the still of them on the bed. And I was like, I don't want to watch a bunch of athletic young people fucking. It's just going to make me feel old and weak. Like it's the same reason I didn't watch, Euphoria, is I'm like, I'm sure it's sexy. It might even be a good story, but I just don't want to be made to feel old and fat. But Challengers kicks ass. And I think what's remarkable about it is that it is a sports movie, but 3 ways. I don't mean they have a 3-way, even though they kind of do. I mean, it is that in a sports movie, there's 2 teams. There's good guys and bad guys. There's home team and away team. And this does everything that's great about sports movies, which is, you can add whatever stakes, you can add whatever character motivations, and just sort of, it's a tabula rasa for your character's stakes and motivations. Anything can be represented by winning the big game. He has to win the big game or win the big match because yada, yada, yada. He gets his kids back. He finally has the glory. He goes all the way, whatever, right? To the point where they seem easy to write because you just sort of impart whatever stakes you want onto the act of playing the game. But this is about the relationship between 3 very competitive people in competition with each other equally at all times. And it makes it absolutely gripping. You both caught this one, right?
Unfortunately, yes. I didn't get the chance to watch it before
sorry.
the deadline.
Would you agree with that, Greg, that it kind of has that like tight butthole, like, oh my God, everything's riding on this one tennis match?
I guess so. I don't know that I don't know that I felt the same way about Challengers as you did. I think in part because there were elements of the love triangle that at one point had me throwing my hands up in the air and yelling, "All right, come on," and the one thing I'll say about it though is that I appreciated. I love the sequence at the end with the tennis stuff is quite good, and it's this shouldn't give anything away, but the whole movie is kind of like you kind of go in and back and forth through time in between this one final tennis match, which is a great way of couching the whole film. And like you keep dropping back into this extremely tense, tennis match. And every time you do, you've been given a lot more information about the relationship.
Context,
because when you're first introduced to this tennis match, you don't even know that the three characters actually know each other. So like it's this kind of like constant peeling of the onion, getting deeper and deeper to the center of what's going on and what's really behind, this match. And the cinematography for that in the final sequence, incredible. Like just as it goes into
the ball as a camera,
the ball POV and I think the actors did a very nice job. My dad is huge into tennis. I know tennis quite well. It looked very, very authentic. So someone on staff for that movie had big love for the game, and I think that really shows. Just unfortunately, I think the relationship frustrated me a little bit and didn't. I didn't not enjoy the film. It is a good film, and I think it's a good pick for a top movie of the year. I didn't get to the same place I think that you did with it.
Amanda had a similar experience. She was like, it's 10 minutes too long in so much as like you said, every time we come back to the tennis match in the present, new stakes have been added, new information has been given, and it was just one too many Jenga blocks for her. And she's like, okay, I don't give a shit what happens. But one thing I really do like, the movie has an ending. Mm-hmm. Which this isn't a spoiler, but I was really worried they were going to leave it ambiguous. And I would have been livid if we didn't I didn't care what the resolution, like who loves who hates who wins, who loses, who whatever. Anything would have been fine. I was really worried. I was really worried they weren't going to give us an answer. And then it has a conclusion, whether you like it or not, irrelevant.
Yeah. I actually quite like the setup because the setup is very early in the movie and and it's just like it's a memorable moment, but there's just enough space between when it first happens and when it gets called back that you've kind of forgotten about it enough that you're just like, oh, he's gonna do it. He's gonna do it.
Did it get you? Did it surprise you?
No, I knew it was coming, but I was in love with the fact that it was going to happen.
It was going to come. Yeah.
Challengers is on my list of, again, movies to see that I didn't get a chance to. In the last week, I tried to catch a couple more movies before we got to recording, and I had a choice between Challengers and what I suspect is going to be Greg's next movie, and I made my choice.
Yeah. Fair enough. I guess we might as well get to it because I'm pretty sure this is a movie that we've all seen. The Substance. I think you're living under a rock if you haven't heard of The Substance at this point. Directed by Coralie Farge. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Stars Demi Moore, Margaret Qualley, and Dennis Quaid. I unabashedly love this movie. the minimalist production and graphic design, the old school creature effects, the relentless butt shots. It's amazing. It's so good. When the substance isn't like dazzling you with perfectly composed photography or creatively disgusting bits of body horror, it's like pounding you with the aching loneliness and emptiness of fame. It's not subtle in its approach at all to what it's trying to say,
yeah,
and I actually absolutely love it for that. Like Coralie Verger reveals, she just kind of like revels in it, you know, like continually upgrading the size of her metaphorical hammer until there's literally nothing left but a bloody mess. So yeah, the substance is so good, you guys. It's it was really, really good. It would have been on my list had we not agreed to all have different movies on our list. I really, really loved it. I loved how lurid the movie is, like deliberately lurid, and how it can make sexy gross and still sexy at the same time. Like that is a needle that gets threaded in this.
I wouldn't call it a needle that gets thread. I'd say it's a pendulum that gets swung. It goes from sexy and horny to gross, back to sexy, back to gross. So whiplash fast that you it all just blurs together.
Yeah. I mean, like it's a Venn diagram that's overlapping, because there are scenes that are simultaneously titillating and grotesque in the way that they're shot and framed and designed.
Yeah. Exploitative, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's so good. And you're absolutely right. Like, it's not a subtle metaphor, but sometimes you don't have to have a subtle metaphor to tell a riveting story with incredible performances. Like Demi Moore, holy crap. Like, talk about a fearless performance in this movie. She is so good.
Yeah.
The production design too, not necessarily production design, but just like general design of it. I've said it a million times in this podcast. I love weird movies. I love movies that look crazy. That's why I got so excited about Hundreds of Beavers and People's Joker. This movie uses surreality like a dash of salt. It's just a little bit weird. Like the fact that the room where, whose ever off week it is down like a weird long hallway, and then a tile bathroom, and then a wall that doesn't seem to have any purpose other than being a blank void to hide a body. Why is her apartment like that?
It's even the idea of the substance itself, how it's sold, her interactions with a character who's only ever referred to as the substance. You're right. It's just this heightened reality where things are just a little off, but still grounded in reality.
And attention to detail. One of the things I loved, I don't know if you guys caught this, and this isn't a spoiler for anyone listening. Okay, actually, give me 1 minute. It might kind of be a spoiler. So skip ahead 1 minute. I'll keep it tight. When she gets the box of the substance in a package in the locker the first time, it's a big square box. And then when she gets the second doses, third doses, whatever, it's half that size. It is just physically half that, the height, but not the width or length. And then when it's time to end the ordeal, it is 1/4 of the original size. I don't know if you guys caught that, but the box is like perfectly symmetrical and shrinks with each iteration.
Yeah.
I don't think that's particularly spoily. If you skipped ahead a minute, you didn't need to.
Or just how much tiles are part of the aesthetic even outside of her bathroom.
Yeah, there's a deliberate attention to detail that I appreciate. It's one of the reasons why I quite like Wes Anderson movies, because they're really there's that quality of attention to detail that I apparently like when you're composing production design and stuff. Yeah. And this definitely hits it. Yep.
I love how quickly it set up its science fiction. They get in the opening shot is just a shot of one egg. They prick it with a needle, and then it bubbles and then splits into 2 eggs, and you're like, got it. I understand what's going to happen. You know?
No other explanation needed.
No, not at all. Yeah. Like, so it's great because when you get to her actually taking the substance, you're already kind of primed, for something wild. And I think that's really clever.
I explained it to Anita, who's not really into gross movies or horror movies. And I pointed out, I had read Greg Aaron's review of the movie before I watched it. And apparently she's not big on body horror movies either and was cackling through this movie. And I think I may have almost walked up to selling Nita on watching it based on the fact that Aaron quite enjoyed it.
Yeah. I wouldn't, if I watch it a second time, it's going to have to be with, if not Amanda, more than one person, because I watched it alone and I think it did hurt my experience of it a little.
I agree. I did exactly the same thing. And I think Anita walked in on me watching it at one point, and I was literally cringing because of what was going on the screen.
It's a squirmy, it's kind of long, and it's a long time to sit really uncomfortably with that, like, that horror movie of like, you keep doubling down, you keep making such terrible decisions. Please stop making bad decisions. And you gotta just like sit there and squirm and
Clearly, we all liked The Substance. And if you haven't seen it, you should check it out for sure. Yeah.
So my last one here, these aren't my top 5 movies of the year. I'd probably, you know what? I'd put Dune 2 here. If you want my top 5 list of movies, the 4 I said and Dune 2 instead of the one I'm about to talk about. But the thing about Dune 2 is enough ink has been spilled on it. I don't have anything to say other than worm bad, spice good. Denis Villeneuve can do no wrong. Dune 2, whatever. Great movie. I would like to discuss Megalopolis. And specifically any film buff who might be listening to this, any fan of the cinephiles as it were, or even just the general movie going public in general. I'm going to do the like youth pastor thing. I'm going to flip a chair around backwards and be like, gang, let's wrap. Cause I got to tell you, I'm a little disappointed in everyone vis-a-vis Megalopolis. It's not a great movie. It's a muddled, confused mess of themes and ideas, but it is visually a spectacle. And given the meta text that it exists in, like we were talking about earlier, I can't not watch movies without knowing the life story of the person who made it and putting that reading into the film. Whether that's, understanding where Vera Drew came from making The People's Joker, or knowing the career and legacy of Francis Ford Coppola and the fact that he has been ruminating on this film since the 80s. And his wine-pickled brain has finally been like, let's pull the trigger, sold his fortune to self-finance his like dream magnum opus as he gets older and older, has an all-star cast, completely buy in 1,000%. And everyone was like, I don't know, it looks weird. And it's like, all of you go fuck yourselves. What do you want? And so I just wanted to drive the point home. I would like to share a handful of movies I look up that did better domestic box office than Megalopolis. I cannot believe more people were like, one ticket to the following, please, before going to see, instead of going, hey, one for Megalopolis. The Crow.
Ooh.
The remake of The Crow. Harold and the Purple Crayon. A kid's movie about Zach Levy with a purple crayon, a magic crayon. Night Swim, which was a horror movie released in January, which are always the worst ones. And it's Night Swim has made multiple worst of the year lists, and more people bought a ticket to see that than Megalopolis. Obviously, Madam Web and Craven the Hunter. Bummer. Little movie called Sound of Hope, the story of Possum Trot. You guys familiar with that one?
Nope.
No, of course not. What the fuck is that movie? Unfortunately, here's some sad ones. Reagan. More people bought a ticket to see Reagan. And more people bought a ticket to see Am I Racist? The
Oh my God.
bad faith, culture war, petty contrarian claptrap from the guy who is, yes, for sure racist.
Yeah, you were right. You did make me sad. That did make me sad.
And one more movie just to really drive it home, make a point. A perfectly good movie in its own right. It achieves what it sets out to do. No shade to this film, but just from a subject matter standpoint, more people went to see Terrifier 3 than Megalopolis. They would literally rather watch a movie that is as long as Megalopolis, give or take like 10 minutes, like well over 2 hours, Terrifier 3, of visceral, bloody gore, just an insane sociopathic clown hacking people to death for over 2 hours. They would rather watch that than Adam Driver go, but what if we made the future better? And it's just a drag. So take a chance on Megalopolis. It wasn't that bad, and it was kind of weird and fun to watch. And I'm just disappointed that so many really shitty movies beat it out so handily, because it should have been something people were excited to see, even if it kind of sucked.
Spoiler alert. We are probably going to do Megalopolis for an episode in this season. So that'll, if nothing else, be an excuse for you to watch it.
Sure. But like, I don't want to say flat out no, we don't want to do it, because I love talking movies with you guys. But it's, I guess the point of like the fact of, is it good or could we have some notes make it better, kind of isn't the point.
Yeah, fair enough.
It's about like, what is this thing that Francis Ford Coppola has just been like drinking wine and imagining for the last 40 years? And like let him cook, I guess. Like, I guess that's kind of why I don't want to do a notes about it. Is like,
are you suggesting we can't improve upon that?
we might be able to, but I guess it's kind of not the point. Like, it's, and again, I'm not flat out saying that's
but maybe a good point, a good counterpoint. We had previously bandied about the idea of maybe doing it because it did get such a middling kind of reception. But maybe you've made the point that we shouldn't do it. Maybe you should just go out and watch it on your own.
Yeah, it's something else. It's a trip, and it's memorable, and it, like hundreds of Beavers, not something you've ever seen before. And it might be kind of confused in its execution, but it's also stunning in its ambition. And that should be worth more than a ticket to see Harold and the Purple Crayon.
It reminds me of something that we said way back in the Don't Worry, Darling episode, where we talked about much rather seeing a movie that is interesting and trying rather than another bland piece of slop, you know, like there's so many like, boring, you've seen it before type movies that are in theaters. Seeing a movie like Megalopolis in theaters is, I mean, that's a rare event, you know, and the closeout of one man's storied career, and him trying something arguably different. I don't know. That's probably a little worth your money.
Yeah. And worth an entire vineyard in Napa Valley. So,
yeah.
Like, dude put it all on the line. And I do appreciate that the cast commits totally. Like, Adam Driver's great. Aubrey Plaza's great. Shia LaBeouf is like wild what he's doing. And yeah, everyone is just bought in. And if you buy into, you won't leave unhappy.
Fair.
Well, how do I follow that up? How about with a movie that came out as late in the year as a movie probably can? We all actually went to see this one together in the theater, and that was Nosferatu, the remake by Robert Eggers, starring Nicholas Hoult, Lily Rose Depp, Aaron Taylor Johnson, once again, second time he's appeared on my list, and Willem Dafoe. Guys, Nosferatu was a really good movie.
Yeah.
It was a visual smorgasbord. It was a love letter to the story of Dracula, to the two previous versions of Nosferatu, to like the Coppola version of Dracula in some ways. It has some great vampire effects. again, it's visually spectacular. It's got this kind of feminist undercurrent, which I really enjoyed, because Lily Rose Depp's character is really at the core of the story, and she's the hero, surrounded by all of these men who are just kind of trying their best and coming up short. It's so good, and it's so worth checking out. And especially if you love a good Dracula, and I love a good Dracula, which I even said just a last episode with Voyage of the Demeter. Nosferatu's a pretty good Dracula, you guys. And that's my take on it. You both saw it too, though. So what did you guys think?
Oh,
It's good.
Yeah, I loved it. It's so. I think everything, while not everything that Robert Eggers has done has been necessarily like a huge home run for me, I always walk away from it feeling like I've seen something interesting. And that's the most important thing. It's almost kind of like Christopher Nolan sometimes. Like I watched his Tenet was I don't know if I could say it was a good movie or a great movie. But it was certainly interesting in its themes and construction and everything else, you know? But this is, I think, to me, it's hard to say whether The Witch or Nosferatu is his best film for me. I don't know. It's shot so well. The performance by Skarsgård,
yes,
as Orlok is,
he's unrecognizable
completely, including his voice. It's like what he's doing with the voice is just, it's so creepy.
As someone who breathes loudly, it's really nice to see yourself represented on screen. Everyone involved, is going hard in the paint for it, and I really enjoyed it. And as I mentioned, I think when we got out of the theater, I had said that I don't really have a lot of experience with Dracula lore. Most of the vampire stuff I'm exposed to is like Blade and that type of stuff. Like they're very modern, more zombie-esque version of vampires, and I think this is it was a good introduction to something more more in love with the history of Dracula, and something that I think will probably inspire me to go fishing for more.
Just to go back to Aaron Taylor Johnson for a moment as well, speaking of the actors, in a year where he appeared in Fall Guy in a very broad semi-comedic role, and in Kraven the Hunter, enough said, he is really good in Nosferatu.
Yeah.
And if you ever had a doubt that Aaron Taylor Johnson is a good actor, he is excellent in this movie. And to comment a little bit on what you were just saying, Greg, about how you kind of took this as a bit of an introduction to your Dracula lore. When we saw the movie, we saw it with another longtime friend of the show. I'm not going to shame him by saying his name at this time, who kind of was like, yeah, but it was just Dracula again. I've seen Dracula. Why do we need to see Dracula again? And I didn't say it at the time because I had to kind of ruminate on that a little bit. Why do I like seeing Dracula over and over? And I kind of came down to this. There's a reason we keep remaking Shakespeare. And that's because they're great stories that it's always interesting to see someone's take on, to see someone bring new depth to it, or pluck out different themes, or give a different performance. And Dracula's up there with Shakespeare for me, in that it is a great story that's always told interestingly and differently every time I see it. And I legitimately hope that we'll keep retelling Dracula forever. And that there will be, like, 5 years from now, we'll get another Dracula movie. And it might be a hit or miss. I want to see it.
I love that you brought this up, because it was something I had in my notes under People's Joker that I didn't find a time to articulate. You're right. We've been remaking Shakespeare for years. Now we're getting some 19th century fiction is starting to get that treatment. You can go farther back, Arthurian legend, Greek gods of myth. Like, how often are the tales of the Greek gods retold?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this a lot last night, because I went and saw Beetlejuice the musical. And I was like, at what point does 20th and 21st century media hit that like Shakespeare Dracula level, or even that like Bible stories and Greek god level, where it's just the tale of, and it's not tied to IP or anything like that? And I'm like, what if Beetlejuice becomes one of those? Or even the way Vera Drew uses the Batman lore to tell her story and reimagines it in that way. But like, the story of Beetlejuice is about a mercurial trickster who comes to your house and haunts it, and you need to trick him to get out. And like, we've been telling a version of that story. I mean, it's almost not even totally dissimilar to Nosferatu.
Yeah.
And so I'm just excited. I mean, I won't live long enough to see it, but it's fun to think about what pieces of popular culture from the last 150, 200 years will reach that goated status of your Draculas, your Shakespeare's, and how many of them will be superheroes and how many of them will be like, the example I think of is like Beetlejuice, like something that's,
That objectively is silly that you wouldn't have expected to become a big thing. Yeah.
But I'm like, I'm watching a retelling of the Beetlejuice tale. Like, I'm like, it's
musical
Beetlejuice
retelling of
like,
the Beetlejuice
you know what
tale.
I mean? But I'm like, it's such a stupid movie but to be like, how many times before it is decoupled from the Tim Burton movie and is just the story of, don't say his name 3 times, like, like, Bloody Mary, so, yeah. So thank you for that. What a great observation. Cause I've been thinking about that a lot recently as well.
Perfect. But
I'm glad we're not in any disagreement. I'm glad generally things have gotten along. No one's really butting heads about different conflicting ideas. Unless, Greg, what's your last movie?
Yeah, I was just thinking as we were pulling up to this, is like I should have maybe not waited to the end to.
Oh, I'm glad you did.
To name maybe the
Let's
most controversial film on the list. When the trailer dropped for Civil War, I was extremely excited that an artist was going to take on something that, a subject that will kind of meet the political moment, and really speak to what is happening politically in the United States and, virtually everywhere else, and it wasn't that. I remember when the trailer dropped and a lot of people were almost immediately put off by it, and analyzing like, well, why would Texas and California join forces? That doesn't make any sense, or whatever. The way that it's marketed, you would think that this is a war film. Nope, not that. This is more closely aligned with like a film about the pursuit of art than it is any kind of war film. So I think, what's interesting is like, myself and Aaron both seem to have been able to make that pivot. Once we were introduced to the film and get a sense of like, this is about journalism. This is about the pursuit, sometimes like fearless and maybe obsessive pursuit of, your craft, perseverance in it, dedication to it. And I feel like it is extremely successful in that regard. And I feel like this movie is the most misunderstood movie of the year. And I think it's brilliant. There are at least 3 scenes that continue to live in my head. And I don't want to necessarily go through them bit by bit because just in case people haven't seen it, and I don't want to necessarily spoil everything for them. But like, there's a scene about, that examines sort of like the brutality of death in the battlefield, and it for me, it calls into memory, one of the most arresting scenes in, All Quiet on the Western Front. Just this, the slow inevitability, of death and helplessness in the field of battle. And another scene sort of like depicts the encompassing nature of the desire for survival, and that in those moments, like there's no thought of loyalty or partisanship or whatever. It's just about surviving. And in fact, that scene very explicitly tells you that Civil War is not a movie about necessarily the American political scene.
Is that the one where the two guys are looking at the sniper in the house?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a really crazily intense scene about the irrationality of hatred. There's so much going on in this movie that I found completely arresting. And there's also cinematography is great. There's a scene at the end that reminds me of Children of Men. It's just wonderful. And I know, Liam, you'd kind of mentioned that, I kind of said that, Civil War is using the backdrop of an American Civil War to tell a different story. And you, I don't know if you question the appropriateness of that, but just like, if it is it, I think more or less, is it at all necessary?
Yeah.
I sat with that, for quite a while. And I admit that it is, I think you more or less have an argument that, if you're not going to, directly speak to it, then what's the point, especially in the political climate we're in. But one thing that did stick out to me is that if the backdrop wasn't the American Civil War, like a new Civil War, where would it be set? And I have a feeling because, we've seen journalism movies like this, always set in foreign lands, and things like that, where,
okay.
You're always getting the perspective that you're always getting is that of this, this land that's all in constant turmoil. And what this does is put the futility of war and those explorations firmly in a Western North American setting where it can't be avoided. It cannot be pawned off on this country has been at war forever or any of that stuff. It is laser focused on this perspective.
That is one of the most cogent arguments for that, that use of this subject matter that I have heard. I really appreciate that. Because I also appreciate that you remembered what I said. More or less, that's what I remember articulating. I've also had time to sit on it. And I also, make no mistake, I did like the film overall. I would also say one of the themes that you didn't touch on that I took away from it was this idea of no one's above it all. Everyone has something they will essentially die for in the way,
Right.
She's nonpartisan. She's just a journalist, but she forms a real good bond with that young woman. And that there's the thing she cares about. But you said something the most misunderstood movie of the year. And I still do think like you said, there's an argument to be made. Why bring this up? I was all ready to kind of go to bat at it, but like I said, you've made one of the most cogent arguments for it. So I'm not, my claws are not claws retracted. But the example I came up with of I guess why people came out frustrated and not understanding it. And also I found a lot of people who did understand it and did take it away. There was kind of this snobbiness, this sort of oh, you didn't, I'm not saying you did, but other letterboxd reviews and stuff I read, this sort of like, it's not about that. It's actually about this. And you just didn't have a deep enough meaning or reading of it. And normally I love that. Normally I'm that smug asshole and I love being that smug asshole. But in defense of the people who left confused and frustrated, the example I came to was like, imagine if Alex Garland's other great film, Ex Machina, was exactly the movie we have, a great rumination on artificial intelligence and the nature of, human consciousness and how close it could be to something like machine learning, and all the things it has to say about consciousness and technology and all of that, but swap out the loosely allusioned to character, like the Steve Jobs type character, with someone said it today instead of 10 years ago when it was made, with an explicitly Elon Musk character.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Elon's invention, all of his good things like Dogecoin, the Boring Company, SpaceX, his kid's weird name. The Elon of it all is front and center in the marketing and in the text. And it doesn't have any, and Elon Musk is someone who everyone has big opinions on and big emotions on.
Yeah.
Much like the divisive political climate we exist in. If that movie carried on as written, only reflecting on the AI and the consciousness and all that, it's not unreasonable for people to come out and be like, but then why the Elon of it all? Why bring up him if you're not going to say anything about Elon? Sure, it's about this other thing and it articulates that thing brilliantly, but like, why spend so much time on this thing that people are very emotional about without really addressing it? And I guess that's just like, I don't think it's an unfair question. I think you answered it really well with your explanation of like, well, where would it be set? But I found most people didn't have an argument like that. They just sort of went, well, you just didn't get it. And it's like, I don't think it's an unfair question.
I think I agree. And I think the reason that I agree with that is I had to sit with your counterpoint for quite a while before I felt like I could come up with an appropriate counter argument, Yeah. And when you're going to the theater and you're expecting to see one thing and then are presented with another, it is very difficult to, in that moment, to make a pivot. And if you're not familiar with Alex Garland either, then maybe that's going to be even more difficult, because you might think that you're going in to see, a more established, I shouldn't say established, but a more run-of-the-mill director's film that's, here, I want to see some action or whatever. And, I think that given, like, I know the director, I'm a fan of his writing. We have 2 Annihilation posters in our house right now, I think that Aaron and I were primed to make that pivot very quickly, and we did. And then we enjoyed it quite a bit.
I think some of it is that idea of like, oh, I was promised this by the marketing and the title and I didn't get it. I think it runs a little deeper than that, because it's also very much in your face in the text of the movie. Even if you saw this movie sight without ever seeing a poster or a trailer or even knowing the title, I think people would be like, but why this touchy issue though? Yeah. So I don't think I agree with you. I just think it runs a little deeper than the marketing promised me one thing and I got something else.
I think that's more or less fair, because like at the end of the day, like, could I justify it being called Civil War specifically? Not really. And like the part of art is like when like you're putting ideas into people's heads and then you lose control of how they interpret those things. So every artist has to be very conscious about what it is that they're putting into other people's brains. That is what makes film so interesting as a medium, is that there are limitless decisions that you have to make to ensure that your vision and ideas are being interpret it as closely to your vision as possible, right? So if you go in and you make a movie about Civil War, you have to know that there's, I mean, obviously it's really loaded to
Loaded's a great word.
You know, to make a movie about that. But there are a lot of people, myself included, who really do think that kind of thing is not really that far off in the future for Americans and maybe many other places as well. So, you know, you have to be conscious of that and willing to accept the consequences that maybe not everyone's going to accept this as a setting, you know?
Yeah.
So,
but to put a funny button on this, people have not been able to hang with Alex Garland movies from day one. When I went and saw Ex Machina, the guy I was like, 2 for Ex Machina, please. And the guy's like, you're the first person who's pronounced that correctly all day. So just everything the guy does is hard to interpret by design.
Yeah. I remember
right down to the spelling of his movies.
Yeah. I remember seeing like videos of like the ending of Annihilation explained and like,
yeah.
No, you missed the point. I'm sorry. It went right by you.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen the Dan Olsen thing where he rips on all the people trying to quote unquote explain the ending of Annihilation. Yeah. So, amazing. Well, what a great year in film it has been. Thank you, you guys, for giving me those great suggestions. I hope you please watch People's Joker with me. I love it so much. I'll watch it again. I'll give you the Blu-ray. But we're not the only people who love movies. You guys love movies too, our dear listeners. And we had some comments from you. We asked your favorite movies of the year. Let's get into them now. Thank you to everyone who contributed. Friend of the pod, Josh Scar from the Talking Smack podcast says The Wild Robot was my top movie. Did either of you catch that one?
No,
I really wanted to.
I've heard that if you're interested in The Wild Robot, you should probably check out Flow. Which apparently
rules.
Apparently, it's a very, very good movie. So, Josh, if you haven't seen Flow, apparently you should check that one out.
The end gut punch. It's such a Flow will make you cry. Don't watch Flow if you don't want to cry.
Zolgar says just Furiosa. And you know what? I'm glad somebody brought it up. It's a movie that unfortunately I haven't had a chance to see, but I've heard excellent things about and do want to get around to finally seeing. And it didn't make it on any of our lists. I don't know if you guys got a chance to see it or not, but I'm glad somebody brought it up.
I did consider it, like, in the end, like, because Speak No Evil was the last one that made it in for me. And I kind of hemmed and hawed about which one to include. And Furiosa is very good, but it occurred to me that I had more thoughts about Speak No Evil, and it was living in my head a little bit more, and that's what led me to include that instead.
Kind of like Liam with Megalopolis versus Dune 2.
Yeah, I have a top 10 list, and I don't even know how much of what I talked about today makes it to the top 10, but it's just the stuff I'm excited about. And in that vein, Furiosa for me, like, it was very good. Mad Max Fury Road is probably one of my all-time favorite films, possibly one of the best movies made this century. And in my brain, Mad Max Fury Road is so good that it's just paying dividends years later, that it's just like,
need to revisit.
It's not a Dune 1, Dune 2 thing, or even like a Spider-Verse thing. It's just like Furiosa is just an extension of that movie.
Right.
In a way that I'm just like, I just count it with the other one in my head mentally. Like, it's just, it's the movie. Mad Max Fury Road is the movie that keeps on giving. We got a black and white version. We got a sequel that recontextualizes some of it. That's just as good, but not quite as good. But it just felt like more Mad Max to me as opposed to its own thing. So
yeah,
so I didn't count it because it came out 10 years ago. Intra 86 says, I've only been to the theater 3 times in 2024. There's a ton of must-see potential favorites that I just haven't got to yet. But I have to go with Hundreds of Beavers.
Oh, yeah.
I grew up on Three Stooges and Looney Tunes, and it's been so long since a modern straight comedy made me laugh and smile this much. I love the jank and weirdness you get from the practical effects and obviously fake special effects. As cliche as it sounds, this movie reminded me of why I love movies, and it inspired me to watch more films from the silent era. Shout out to movies. And carries on, but that's the main part of the quote.
Hundreds of Beavers was also one of my top movies of the year, possibly my top movie of the year. It's definitely jockeying for position with Nosferatu. It's good. It's a good movie.
Jank is a great word to describe it. I'm surprised. Like, I love describing things as jank as a Magic the Gathering player. It's one of the words that gets bandied about in the hobby jargon. But yeah, it's a janky movie in the best way possible.
Lovingly janky.
Mm-hmm.
Friend of the pod, Robin Taylor, says it's been a truly miserable year for mainstream movies. However, Inside Out 2 is the movie he had the most immediate and intense emotional reaction to. At the end of the day, though, Robin Taylor giving it to the substance. Fresh, bold, original, and a clear point of view, he says.
I should give Inside Out 2 credit that I think it has the most realistic and relatable depiction of a panic attack that I've seen on film. So kudos to the filmmakers for really getting that right.
And lastly, Deja says, weird year for me. I watched a lot of trash, but I still haven't seen most of the films I was excited for last year. Flow, The Remarkable Life of Eblin, and an animated short called Ushi. Max and Moritz were probably my faves. I also thought Thelma, Civil War, Power, Late Night with the Devil, and The Contestant were all great. Left field pick, Sugar Plumbed, a corny Hallmark movie. My friend's nephew is fifth billed in it. Fun. And that was charming. Fun and better than it has any right to be. I want to zero in on, Flow was great. Remarkable Life of Eblin was an interesting movie that I did catch this year. Wouldn't count it among my favorites. I'll be honest, like, not good. But it still made me cry like crazy. Like, it's fine as a movie, and I bawled my eyes out.
If you're going to zero in on one in there, I'm going to zero in on Late Night with the Devil. I really enjoyed Late Night with the Devil. So it was a pretty good horror film, and David Dastmalchian is really good in it. And if you haven't checked it out, it came out pretty early in the year. So that's why I think it maybe slipped off a lot of people's top lists, but it was pretty solid, and it's worth checking out.
If I can comment on Late Night with the Devil, I really liked it. It did something in its structure and its framing that I understand why they did it, but I think if they had taken the slightly more ambitious approach, it would have made it like one of the better movies of the year or of all time, or made it fail miserably. And that was, there is material we see before the tape begins, and there is character interactions we see in the commercial breaks when the cameras aren't rolling. And they're able to do a lot of exposition and a lot of, world building and things like that. That would have been much harder to do if all we ever saw was like found footage style, just what the cameras captured that night. And I there's a little part of me, like, I get why they did it. It was the slightly easier of the two options, but I kind of wish they had just been a little more ambitious and tried to tell their story just within the confines of making this one episode like a lost media thing.
There's, I want to say that there's some cut material, which indicates that the stuff we're seeing backstage is actually from a documentary crew that's there to record this night, because it's supposed to be his record-breaking episode. So it's
that contextualizes the beginning too.
Yeah, and so it's additional footage that was added in for this like theatrical release of this shocking videotape. But it's not made clear. And I think that I agree with you at the end of the day, fundamentally. I think it would have been better if that had been made clear, or if it was cut out entirely. Where I have some notes saying Late Night with the Devil right now, and we're supposed to be finishing up this episode. So let's move on.
We're moving on to the outro. Thank you to everyone for listening. This has been our year in review. I look forward to another great year of film and talking it talking about it with you guys.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to chat with us, let us know some of your favorites from the last year. Tell us what you're excited for this year. You can reach us via various social media channels. We're on Facebook still, facebook.com/I have some notes. We're over on the Blue Sky at I have some notes. You can also get in touch with us on our Discord server. That's the best place to chat with us. We're always there. There's always great conversations going on a number of different channels. You can find the link to that in our notes below. And of course, give us a little rating and review on your podcatcher of choice, because that helps with our visibility on the algorithms and such, and definitely helps us out.
You know what else helps us out? Subscribing to our Patreon. Thank you to everyone who already subscribes. And if you want to join the stuff we've got, subscribe, be a patron. We have a lot of great content over at patreon.com/I have some notes. Some other shows kind of like this one where we recommend good things, where we go deep on some side topics. Specifically, there's a side notes episode where I discuss The Apprentice and Rumors, which are two other really great movies that came out this year that I quite liked, but I didn't want to use any more of this particular platform to talk about the guy The Apprentice is about. But The Apprentice rules. And you can hear me talk about it behind the paywall over at patreon.com/I have some notes.
Yeah, and tune in for 2 weeks for Megalopolis. Just kidding. We, as yet, have not picked a movie yet. We'll be doing in 2 weeks, but rest assured, it will be mediocre, and it will require fixes.
Until then, I'm Liam Creswick.
I'm Scott C. Bourgeois.
I'm Greg Beaver. Keep watching the skies.